Und um das Haus, in dem das Massaker stattgefunden hat, wurde vermint. Es ist ein Geisterdorf wie viele hier. Seit Tagen kursieren Gerüchte über Massengräber. Noch ist die Bundeswehr mit der Sicherung des Kosovo-Gebiets beschäftigt. Doch es gibt Augenzeugenberichte, Hinweise auf weitere, auf größere Massengräber und man wird sie finden.
Rand von Pristina, Soldaten der 4. Brigade bewachen die Ausfallstraße, aber viel mehr auch nicht. Nur wenige Straßen im Kosovo sind sicher, so der KFOR-Presseoffizier heute. In der Tat, ein blutverschmierter Taxifahrer berichtet, dass sein Fahrgast heute von Unbekannten erschossen wurde, am Stadtrand von Pristina. Die Aussage wird gefilmt und protokolliert, aber viel mehr kann der Offizier auch nicht tun, denn schon kommt eine verzweifelte albanische Familie, die heute in ihr Dorf nahe Pristina zurückkehren wollte. Aber schon von weitem sahen sie Rauchwolken, sagt der Mann, auch sein Haus brannte. Der Offizier verspricht, den nächsten Checkpoint zu informieren. Zu spät. Das Dorf Bakşia brennt. Abrückende serbische Truppen oder Paramilitärs haben ganze Arbeit geleistet. Kurz später rücken sie ab. Nicht wie Geschlagene, sondern im höhnischen Triumph an den britischen Panzern vorbei. Dass die jugoslawische Armee nicht zerschlagen wurde, wie ein ranghoher NATO-Offizier heute bestätigte, hier in den trotzigen Gesten der gefürchteten Paramilitärs wurde es sichtbar. 2 neue Massengräber wurden heute entdeckt. Die ersten UNO-Ermittler sichern Beweise, aber die Täter fahren nach Hause. Und die UÇK-Kämpfer kommen ebenfalls zurück. Glogovac in Uniform marschierten sie heute ein, stolz und rachedurstig. Die UÇK wird die reguläre Armee eines freien Kosovos, sagten heute gleich 2 UÇK-Kommandeure. UÇK-Checkpoints überall. Und auch Pristina sei bereits unter UÇK-Kontrolle, so ein Kommandeur heute. Man habe die NATO davon informiert.
Fernsehnachrichten sind für Familie Matoshi der einzige Kontakt zu ihrer Heimat. Seit Monaten wissen sie nicht, was aus ihren Verwandten geworden ist. Mit 15 Personen ist ein Teil der Großfamilie aus dem Kosovo geflüchtet. In karg eingerichteten Zimmern lebt sie, seit 2 Monaten schon abgeschieden im Hunsrück. Euphorie ist hier nach dem Einmarsch der KFOR-Friedenstruppe nicht zu spüren. Zu groß ist die Ungewissheit, was sie bei ihrer Rückkehr erwartet. Sicherlich wird es irgendwann Frieden geben, wenn die internationalen Truppen im Kosovo für die Sicherheit sorgen, meint Ekrem Matoshi, das Familienoberhaupt. Aber wir müssen jetzt erst einmal abwarten, was passiert. Wir hoffen auf ein internationales Hilfsprogramm. Dann gehen wir sofort wieder zurück in unsere Heimat. Warten auf die einzige Beschäftigung der Kosovo-Flüchtlinge, auch im zentralen Aufnahmelager in Ingelheim am Rhein. Routine ist wieder eingekehrt, nichts erinnert mehr an den Besuch von Präsident Clinton vor ein paar Wochen, als die Flüchtlinge hier kurz in das Licht der Weltöffentlichkeit gerückt waren. Seit dem Einmarsch der Friedenstruppen haben die Menschen hier zwar wieder Hoffnung, doch es bleibt die Angst. Es gibt noch zu viele Minen. Dazu kommen die Heckenschützen. Außerdem sind unsere Häuser zerstört, meint Salihu Selmon. Erst wenn es wieder richtig sicher ist, können wir zurück. Wir brauchen auf jeden Fall den Schutz der NATO-Länder, nicht der Russen, denn die wollen nur die serbische Minderheit schützen. Zurück in ein sicheres Kosovo, so die einhellige Meinung der Flüchtlinge. Dort liegt meine Zukunft, sagt Bukirje, die junge Studentin, die mit Schlägen aus Pristina vertrieben wurde. Jetzt will sie so schnell wie möglich wieder ihr Sprachstudium aufnehmen. Doch die Flüchtlinge müssen sich gedulden. Die deutschen Behörden haben noch keine konkreten Pläne zur Rückkehr der Menschen. Erst wenn die großen Lager in Albanien und Mazedonien geräumt sind, können die Flüchtlingsfamilien aus Deutschland zurück in ihre Heimat. Dann ist zwar offiziell Frieden im Kosovo, doch friedlich ist es dort wohl noch lange nicht.
With phase 1 of the Serb withdrawal now complete, NATO forces today thrust north towards the Serb border. The Serbs have until Sunday night to get out of here, but NATO is anxious to secure the routes north through Kosovo up to the Serb border. It's the first time NATO forces have been this far north, and for the Albanians it's the end of a long ordeal at the hands of the Serbs. Not only are their forces leaving, but so are unknown thousands of Serb civilians, some having to run the gauntlet of the ethnic Albanians. Some of those Albanians have nothing to celebrate. They've been hiding for weeks in the mountains and have returned to find their homes destroyed. 2 of this family of 5 brothers were killed as they fled, so were their wives. They returned this morning to find their homes, their farm equipment, even their supplies of grain seed wantonly destroyed by the departing Serbs. They appear to be carrying out a scorched earth policy. Homes are blazing, hardly a building remains intact. And this under the eyes of NATO, who are powerless to intervene until midnight on Sunday, when the perpetrators will have gone. What they've seen as they move north today sickens the NATO forces.
I think it's just the mindless sort of wanton nature of it. It's indiscriminate. You see a pleasant house that you sort of and say what a wonderful location or whatever, and it's destroyed. There seems to be no rhyme or reason to it. It's just all sort of rather senseless and mindless.
This is one of the reasons the NATO forces have driven so far forward, so fast, and so close to the Serb border, to secure the water supply for Pristina, where the situation is becoming serious. This was, still is in fact until midnight Sunday, the front line between the Serb and Albanian irregular forces. It's been secured today by NATO, but again the Serbs have left their nasty mark. The two boats, for example, are booby-trapped. Not all the damage, though, is down to the Serbs. NATO bombs destroyed much of the infrastructure in this area. For the most part today, Serb forces were persuasively adamant about not being seen on camera, but they couldn't resist showing off this unexploded NATO missile with its less than amusing messages. Tonight, NATO's front line is, ironically really, on the road north, codenamed Route Snake, at the bridge at Luzan, where in late April a NATO bomb hit a bus, killing, according to the Serbs, 69 people. Behind them, the Serbs are gathering their forces for a final departure through NATO's new front line. But that will not be the end of the Kosovo crisis. It will take years and billions of pounds to make this place worth living in again. And for many, that day will never come. Keith Graves, Sky News on the Kosovo-Serb border.
Although the Serb army withdrawal is a welcome sight for most here, for NATO there are plenty of problems still ahead. Allegations of Serb atrocities continue. Today bodies were found in 4 wells in the Drenica region not far from here, and negotiations over the role of the Russian peacekeepers still not resolved. Michael Sullivan now reports.
Russia's very own relief convoy arrived in Pristina today, carrying food, water, fuel and money for the Russian force of 200, which beat the NATO troops to Pristina airport last week and stayed there, refusing to let anyone else in. They're still there, but the British NATO commander said it wasn't important to him and he didn't intend to get into an argument about it. As a gesture of goodwill, NATO provided an escort for the convoy as it drove into Kosovo from Bosnia. But the role of the Russians in the peacekeeping force in Kosovo is under discussion in Helsinki. The Russian Defense Minister Igor Sergeyev flew in there today, followed by the American Defense Secretary William Cohen. The tricky question of the Russian occupation of the airport is on the agenda. Serb civilians, as well as the Serb military, are fleeing Kosovo in their thousands for fear of ethnic Albanian reprisals, some of them setting fire to their homes before leaving in the knowledge that they'll not be back. But British troops in Pristina have arranged a display of confiscated weaponry as proof that they're determined to disarm the civilian population that remains and the Kosovo Liberation Army.
This has all been taken from civilians who are carrying arms and members of the KLA who've entered the town carrying arms.
But some of the disarmed KLA members are now assisting in the task of uncovering the growing evidence of Serb atrocities. In the village of Drenica, the wells are full of the dead, women and old people, dragged from their homes and shot. Greek troops arrived in Kosovo today. That country's historical sympathy with the Serbs made it the least enthusiastic member of NATO's operation, and its government said it would join in only when the bombing stopped. Michael Sullivan, Sky News.
For a second day, thousands of refugees are trekking back into Kosovo. Aid workers say that over 1,000 people are crossing the border every hour from Macedonia and Albania, despite all the warnings of the dangers ahead. My colleague Emma Hurd has spent the day near the border.
Whatever the warnings, these refugees weren't going to wait. Bumper to bumper, cars packed with families and their meagre possessions headed towards the Blace border crossing in Macedonia and over into Kosovo. They know it's still a dangerous place, but after months as refugees, they just want to be home.
It may be safer to wait for a week or two, but her children, they just want to go. They just don't want to stay anymore. When they see NATO, they get all excited and they just want to go home. Worries him very much when other people say do not go back yet, it's not safe, you might get killed. But he still wants to go there because, as he said, all of his family, half of his family is over there.
Even as they inched towards the border, they were handed leaflets by the United Nations Refugee Agency, warning of the dangers that await them and urging them to turn around and wait in Macedonia. But no one did.
There is a main road from this border crossing all the way to Pristina, and that main road seems to be safe as long as you stick to the main road. But it must be remembered that most of the refugees, they live in villages and townships all over Kosovo, which means that they have to deviate from the main road if they want to go back to their homes. And there is a great risk for landmines and other dangers as well.
There are still up to 250,000 ethnic Albanian refugees in Macedonia, almost half of them in the camp, where efforts are being made to prevent people leaving. But there's growing frustration. This rush to the border is exactly what NATO and the refugee agencies had hoped to avoid. They'd planned to clear every village and town in Kosovo of landmines before these people could return. But they don't want to wait. The refugees believe NATO will look after them, but so many will find their houses destroyed, their villages without water or food. It won't be the homecoming they'd hoped for. Emma Hurd, Sky News, on the Kosovo-Macedonian border.
The conflict may be over, but the casualties of war are still emerging. My colleague Andrew Wilson today found a hospital full of wounded KLA fighters and injured Albanian civilians who've come out of hiding in the hills. Ironically, until this week, the building was used as a barracks by their enemy, the Yugoslav army. Andrew joins us live now from that hospital just south of Pristina. Andrew?
Jeremy, yes, you joined me in Urasovac, the town we've been calling Urasovac, but the Albanians prefer to call it Ferizaj. We're in Ferizaj Medical Center, where up until 2 days ago, as you said, it was being used as a VJ barracks. Then they fled, and almost instantly on their heels, the Albanians who worked here many years ago have come back and started using it as what it should be, a hospital again, and bringing with them the patients they've since been treating in the hills, hidden and protected by the KLA. Now let's have a look. Some of these cases are rather disturbing. We've seen their injuries, but we're not going to show them to you, of course. Mihiria is 15 years old. 3 days ago, her and her brother were walking through the fields with their pet cow, or the cow they use for their milk, when they trod on a landmine. Her brother died instantly, 13 years old. Mihiria has terrible injuries to her stomach and her legs and her arm. Her hand is badly damaged. It will be okay, but it'll always be deformed because of the injuries. Now, next to her is Lulieta. She's also 15. Her father, her sister, and her brother, I might say, I wouldn't be saying this if they could speak English, were all killed in the same landmine blast. She's had to have a foot amputated. They had no facilities to do it. When it happened 2 months ago, they had to use normal joinery tools to conduct the operation. The surgeon who did it described it to me as ridiculous. Now, there are other patients here as well, apart from the children who've been treading on landmines, and that's something we'll talk about with the surgeon in a minute. But also here, another man, 45 years old. 2 months ago, he was looking for food in the countryside around here and was shot by a sniper. He was wounded in the stomach. He was treated in the hills. A local GP, who incidentally had worked here 10 years ago, found him and carried him for 8 hours on a horse into the mountains, where he was picked up by the KLA and then treated. Again, he will make a recovery in time, but of course they're plagued here by lack of facilities and lack of drugs. Now, what's interesting about this hospital, we're going to have to walk down the corridor, and I apologize for the dim light, but it's a very dingy place. It's very poorly looked after. But 10 years ago, this was an Albanian and Serb hospital. In 1989, the Serbs kicked out Albanian patients and staff alike. Since then, it was only for Serbs, staffed by Serb doctors. After that, it became a VJ barracks, and now, of course, the KLA have come back. The KLA fought in the hills for 3 months and became expert at looking after themselves and looking after the injuries of the soldiers with barely any instruments to help them in the job. Now here we have some of the victims of the fighting that's been most ferocious over the last 3 months. The first man here, we've already spoken to him previously, was shot in the stomach. Again, it was 2 months ago he was shot in the stomach. He's undergone extensive surgery, but there are still repeated problems with infection. The man in the bed next to him also suffered from a gunshot wound. But at the end is a man called, Safedin Hassanei. He was one of the KLA's top fighters, and on the 3 days ago, on the day of the NATO advance, he was shot by a sniper in the head. He needs extensive reconstructive surgery, but they don't have the facilities to do it. They've managed to patch him up, but it's still, the infection is in danger of spreading back in again. They really need help with cases like this, and reconstructive surgery is not something that can be handled here. And of course, he says, being the brave soldier, they told us he's one of the KLA's bravest soldiers. He was in their special force troop harassing the Serbs. They've told us that he's never complained about the pain once, but clearly he's in a great deal of pain. Now, the one man who controlled all this in the hills is Dr. Besim Hoxha, a KLA doctor, a military doctor, but you took on many civilians as well. Now, doctor, how difficult was it staying in the hills looking after the KLA's health?
Yeah, before 3 months, we started to work in military hospital in mountain. We have many cases of KLA soldiers and civilian too. We have treated in our hospital about 150 patients.
It wasn't a hospital, was it, in the mountains?
Yeah, it was a hospital in mountains. So you can imagine the house was modified like a hospital.
Tell us about when you were in the mountains, when you were traveling through the mountains. You had to move every day, didn't you?
Yeah, during the offensive, we have moved for 11 nights from one place to each place because no place was safe. And we have moved with my equips and with 63 wounded.
Now, tell me, what's your biggest concern about the refugees coming back into Kosovo now?
Yeah, it's a bigger problem because many of the field has landmines. So it's my appeal to refugees don't come back so soon because the NATO alliance must be controlled for the first of the landmines, and then they will become in Kosovo.
Dr. Besim Hoxha, thanks very much indeed. Well, there you are, a warning from the man who's seen most of the results of the conflict so far, that the fields around the border areas and the defensive positions around the towns are riddled with landmines, and he's very fearful that the refugees coming back may become great casualties of those mines. Jeremy, back to you now.
Andrew, just a last thought. When do you think the aid agencies are going to get in there in sufficient numbers to help these people? And presumably this is just one of many, many cases that we're going to find across the province.
It's an interesting question because Ferizaj, formerly known as Urasovac, is very close to Blace crossing in Macedonia, so very easily accessible to the aid agencies. But it was, up until 2 days ago, a Serb stronghold. The retreating VJ army have been instantly replaced, as you see, by the doctors and nurses who worked here 10 years ago. They've come straight back to work, bringing their patients with them. I imagine the aid agencies will find it all too easy to catch up with this hospital and give any help that they possibly can.
Andrew Wilson, many thanks. As well as rebuilding their ravaged homes, Kosovars must try to rebuild their equally devastated economy. Ross Appleyard is in the town of Prizren and reports on the search for jobs.
Marietta has been locked inside her home for the past 3 months. Today, she went back to work with around 60 colleagues for the first time since 1992. The Serb authorities fired these people for refusing to sign a document agreeing with their political ideals. Now the pharmaceutical factory is under the control of KLA politicians.
We've started rebuilding our country. We've started all over again. Our day has come.
For Marietta and her friends, this is an historic day.
I'm very, very happy. After 7 years, I have my job back. I can see all of my colleagues again. I just can't describe how much I've been looking forward to this day.
But the legacy of the Serbs lives on. Fears over booby traps prevented the factory from reopening. At the local fire station, things are different too. The fire chief has been left to clear up the usual debris of a quick Serb departure. but he's still a happy man.
I worked in this fire station 35 years, and after that I was thrown out just like garbage. And now I'm back again after 7 years of unworking. Now I'm very, very happy.
After the initial celebrations following the liberation of Prizren, things are slowly getting back to normal. But it may be some time yet before people can go about their daily business without worrying about guns, bombs, or booby traps. Ross Appleyard, Sky News, Prizren.
Well, Ross joins us now live from Prizren. Ross, as we've all travelled around the country, I mean, it's become more and more apparent to us what a monumental task it is going to be putting Kosovo back together again.
Absolutely, and Kosovo is at the moment dividing itself once more. It's one of those things that happens in the Balkans. A few minutes ago we had a graphic glimpse of the division between the two people here. It's completely cyclical, if you like. 1 minute the Serbs are in charge and forcing the Albanians out. Just 20 minutes ago we saw Serb civilians boarding buses, being escorted out of town by Qershor troops and sent up towards the border with Serbia. So the whole thing goes round and round in a circle, and as for getting Kosovo back together again, it is a complete logistical nightmare. Even factories, as you saw in that report, where people are trying to go back to work, they turn up for work and find the places booby-trapped and can't go back to work. Now, where are the people going to come from? The sappers, the engineers, the troops, the specialists that are going to clear out all these houses, even to allow people to go back home, never mind getting to work. It's a monumental task.
Do you think that the Serbs could possibly stay alongside their returning Albanian neighbours, or does it feel on the ground there in a town like Prizren as if they simply cannot get on in the future?
No, that's absolutely true. They simply cannot get on in the future. That's what all this noise is about. The helicopter going on ahead is escorting the few remaining Serbs who decided to stay in here, but decided at the last minute, no, we can't stay here. We have to get out. K4 helicopters and armoured personnel carriers are escorting them out of the region for that very reason, because they know it's simply not safe for them here. Every night there's gunfire, mostly in celebration, but there will come a time when the celebration will turn to retaliation, and these Serbs simply won't be safe here, regardless of whether they took part in the atrocities that happened in villages like and towns like Prizren.
Ross, good to talk to you. Well, from the far south in Prizren, the far south of the province, to almost to the very north, and Keith Graves, who's made that journey today. Keith, you went up with the household cavalry, I think, along the road and virtually got to the Yugoslav border. What did you see, and how different did that look from the south?
Well, the thing that struck me between the border with Macedonia and the border with Serbia is just how much more damage there is in the northern half of the country. You get north of the city here and you're on a hill and you start looking up, beautiful valley, mountains on either side. It's absolutely gorgeous. You see all these lovely houses, you know, the red brick, lovely tiled roofs, some of them are painted white, stuccoed. It looks absolutely beautiful. And yet when you drive down into it, you suddenly realize that all of these towns and villages, all of these villas standing in their own grounds, they are almost all empty, and most of them have been gutted. And there are no people about. It's a very strange feeling that there are no people around at all in this particular part. And I found it interesting. I was talking right up close to the Serb border with a British Army officer who was the first actually over the border a few days ago. He's with the spearhead squadron of the household cavalry. So he's been in the forefront every step of the way. And I asked him what he thought, and he said exactly the same thing. He said the damage closer to the Macedonian border wasn't as bad as he thought it would be. So they lost all up here. He's found it absolutely appalling. He said, he used the word sickening. Just such an enormous amount of damage.
So you were talking to some people who just returned to their homes. I mean, it really did seem to underline that they've got nothing left.
Absolutely. We came across quite by chance in a valley some Albanians who'd come down, some yesterday and some today from the mountains. They've been up there for weeks. As we approached, they were really quite frightened. No traffic was going along the road, and they were quite scared. We saw them at a distance. We went into the compound, and they'd vanished. It was as though the house was deserted. And we stood there shouting at them, trying to explain that we were English and that we weren't soldiers. And then 2 kids appeared, and then more of them appeared, and then they showed us round. The house was totally gutted. It had been wantonly destroyed. Everything. The pipes had been smashed. The floors had been smashed. Everything that could be ripped out had been. It hadn't been looted. It had just been left there smashed. The tractor had been smashed. They took us out the back. They had stores of grain. This was for planting their fields. It had all been destroyed, wantonly destroyed. And as we moved up the valley, we found dozens of places like this. People were starting to appear out of the mountains, and there was nothing for them to come back to. This is their first night there. They might as well have stayed in the mountains.
They've got no livelihood left.
They've got no livelihood, they've got no electricity, they've got no water, they've got no roofs, they've got no windows, they've got no furniture, they've got absolutely nothing. They are refugees in their own houses.
Presumably, the only way they can get their lives started again is with outside help.
Absolutely. And what you suddenly realise is, I heard this figure mentioned a couple of weeks ago by some European commissioner on it, $20 billion, and I thought that is an impossible figure. It's mind-boggling. When you go up there and have a look, and you stand on the hill and you look at this vast expanse of nothing, you suddenly realise $20 billion may not be enough. It is going to be an absolutely enormous task. And the other thing up there is, of course, that the NATO bombing has destroyed all the infrastructure. Bridges, you have to go round and down and up because the bridges are destroyed. The electricity lines are destroyed. The telephone lines are destroyed. The water pipes are destroyed. And that's by NATO bombing.
This is only the start of it all, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Putting it back together.
Yes.
Keith, thanks very much. Well, we've all been in Pristina now for around 5 days, and the tales of tragedy have been relentless. Our correspondents, like Keith, have reported just some of the horrors of Kosovo, eyewitness accounts of what remains after this brutal campaign of ethnic cleansing. Almost impossible to comprehend in the heart of Europe at the turn of the 20th century. It's only when you take time to sit down and talk to the people whose lives have been blighted by this war that it all starts to come home. And here's one such story. Qershor Salujmami worked all his life to buy a small flat just a few minutes down the road from here. And he was very proud of it. Today he went home after 3 months in hiding, and what he saw broke his heart.
When I opened today the door, I saw that they have stolen 90% of things which was the great value, and the other things, as you see, are broken. We had here 36 paintings of my son and his wife. They are painters. They have stolen 16 or 17 of them, and the other they have broken. You will see.